Hello everyone, it's DJ. I'm not going to have, as you noticed, any sort of intro music or anything of that sort for what you're about to hear. This is just me testing a digital recorder, which I recently acquired. I originally was going to just delete whatever I had recorded after checking it for sound quality, but I went into such detail about the origins of the website, the YouTube channel, the podcast, and some of my goals for the future that I thought it might be worthy to share. So the audio quality was not bad. It's obviously not as good as the condenser microphone I use normally, but I think you'll find that it's good enough for its intended purpose, which is to record material while I'm on the road, since that's a lot of wasted time, and I do spend a lot of time behind the wheel. So I might as well produce something worthy while I'm there. So please enjoy this. I hope you find it informative. It gives you a good idea of how things began and some of my crazy ideas for what I'd like to do in the future with this website, the channel, and the podcast. Forgive all of the ums, ahs, and whatnot as it goes through, because I did not have any sort of plan for what I was going to say. No notes, no plan at all, just a stream of consciousness sort of babbling as I drove to a friend's house. So here we go. I hope you find this enjoyable and informative.
Okay. We are now starting the drive test of this recorder. I'm pulling out into very light traffic because there's lots of snow on the ground. For those of you who know my origins, you are aware that I am by far not a fan of winter, or at least winters that involve all those horrid things like cold, snow, ice, all those horrid things. In fact, the comment I make at work very often is, when I retire, I want to move to a place so far south that the words snow and ice do not exist in the local language. Of course, to do that, I would have to improve my linguistic skills considerably, since English would not be the primary language in such place. This may or may not be a good test of the recorder, because just due to the weather, traffic is going to be rather light, and the only sounds that will probably be in the background are going to be me trying to trudge along through this ice on the road. Hopefully it will be a safe drive. You never know. As we say, plan for the worst, hope for the best. Alright, so finally on the road, going along rather slowly. I probably will not post this. This is just rambling, or who knows, it might be entertaining for my small audience to hear me just talk about whatever. Anyway, it is December 25th, Christmas Day. Even though I personally am not an Orthodox Christian, I am a Jew. I am going to visit friends who have invited me to their holiday dinner. It will be quite the, for those of you who are into diversity, it will be quite the diverse affair, since we will now have an interesting compilation of people. We will have atheists, Jews, and Muslims at this little gathering. You could almost say a microcosm of what world peace should be like, if only. Anyway, that's about a 20-25 minute drive on a good day. This, of course, will not be normal, so it will probably take me a little bit longer to get there. And anyway, let's see. Have I really got anything I want to talk about? Not really. Like I said, I'm just going to ramble. In fact, I've had in the back of my mind since I made the comment of when I retire that my own retirement is pending. I'm going through medical boards. In fact, you may have seen or listened to my series on medical disability retirement. If so, you obviously got the impression that I had some inside knowledge on the facts, and that was true. That's because I'm going through this whole ordeal myself. So that definitely makes it useful rather than what I was before when, as a retirement services officer, I only saw what was at the tail end of the actual retirement order and trying to help the service member after the fact. Now I can actually give some guidance on how things are while actually going through the boards. You might notice that I never use the word process. I'm kind of weird and finicky. There are certain words I do not like just because of the bureaucratic nature of those words these days. When you hear words like entitlement or process, things of that nature, it makes you think of someone, or at least for me, it makes you think of this aloof office worker, this bureaucrat, who really could care less about you specifically, and they're just reciting a script and using words like process and entitlement to sound complicated and thus more important. I've always believed that in order to communicate with people, you need to speak like normal people. And how many people actually use those words? So I come up with other words that are more appropriate, at least in my opinion. For example, you may have heard me say when going through medical boards, I refer to it as a path or a journey. And it really is more like that. It's, while there may be a checklist of things that occur, it's always different for each person. So you can't really call it, as some would, or some do, many do, you can't call it a process. It's a journey. I hesitate to call it an adventure because it's quite obviously not something you'd want to write home about. But it's certainly unique for everyone who has to go through it. The end result is sometimes good, sometimes heartbreaking, often a little bit of both. It's, at least in my case, it's certainly a bittersweet affair. I've been thinking that I'd rather like to have my own retirement take place, even though I do not have enough active duty service for that to occur. I am a reservist. I'm an active duty reservist. I have, by the time this is all said and done, I'll have 24 years of reserve service, but only 13 on the active duty side. So, because of my own medical issues, I was thinking that there would be no way I could retire myself because I don't have enough active duty service, and my reserve retirement, like most of us, would have to wait until age 60 before it would kick in. It was not until I started the medical boards that I realized that it is very possible that I could meet the criteria for medical retirement myself. We'll know more about that in the coming months. But anyway, I now forgot where I was going with that, but that happens when you're just rambling. Anyway, I have long thought that, I've long thought that I'd like to have my own retirement take place, so this is definitely a bittersweet affair. I quite enjoy what I do, being a retirement services officer. This is something that I have always wanted to do. In fact, when I was private and first learned that there was such a thing as retirement from a reserve component, I was enthralled by this. I've always been a number junkie, so I was always crunching the numbers, trying to figure out what my reserve retirement would be, what benefits there were that went along with the money. Often the benefits were in far excess of the value of the money itself. That, of course, depends on points and rank and all that. But being an enlisted member, I could never look forward to a great deal of money on that side. But the benefits themselves would outweigh the money. What I have often thought would be a wonderful thing to do would be to, this is exposing some of my evil plans, what I've often thought would be a wonderful thing to do when I retire would be to start a retirement services / financial planning company to assist retired and currently serving military members in order to help them prepare for the next step in their lives, which is their retirement. As we all know, the military, particularly in combat arms, is a young man's game. It's not something that you can do as well as you progress in age. So you have to think about what comes next. Are you going to become a contractor with the government? Are you going to go out to the private sector? What are you going to do? Are you going to be a lounge visitor and live on your couch watching sports? All of these are things some people want to do. I've actually met some who want nothing more than just to have enough in retirement that they can relax at home, maybe do a few honeydew projects around the house, and that's it. And if that's what makes you excited, gives you a reason to get up in the morning, then all the better for you. The most important thing is having that reason to get up in the morning. What I also say at work when I'm talking to service members is if you don't have a reason to get up in the morning, one day you won't get up in the morning. I have known many people who have retired and died within a year of their retirement because they were what they did. I can personally relate to that. They were what they did, and now that sense of identity has been stripped from them. For example, it's often quite a bit of a culture shock when you'll have someone like, let's just say, a lieutenant colonel or a colonel, a big fish in the reserve component, particularly in the National Guard, where there are very few general officers. When you're a lieutenant colonel or a colonel, you are indeed a big fish in a small pond. But when you retire and go to a civilian company and you say, I was a colonel, they will say, and, meaning, essentially, to use another cliche, that and $1 will give you a cup of coffee. So that what you were in the military very often is not anything at all that a civilian company is seeking. They want to know what you do for them, not what insignia you wore on the uniform. In fact, in some cases, they might choose an enlisted man over an officer because that person brings with him skills that are more readily apparent. Of course, this varies from person to person. It all depends on your experience, your education, the particular specialty you had while in service. Obviously, everything I'm saying right now is just generalities. But to get back to my point, if you are prepared in the financial world, in skills development, in just having an idea of what you're going to do once you leave service, or if you're a reservist, while you're still in service, or or even if it is after leave service, it all depends. If you have a better idea and a more stable foundation for yourself, you will be able to succeed better than you would otherwise. That is what I have been thinking I would like to do when my own retirement started. Now, obviously, in my situation, what I want to do is primarily internet-based. As you've all seen, it's podcasts and YouTube videos, articles on a website. I will introduce other services later on, but since I want to do this primarily by way of the internet, I have to, again, exposing my plan, I have to build an audience, establish myself as an expert in the field before I actually need to rely on that. And that was part of the reason for setting up this channel and this website in the first place. Now, since I've touched on the channel and the website, let me back up and tell you the real origin of that. This website project started long before I ever thought that I would use it as a way to enhance my career upon leaving service. And obviously, the only way to better yourself in a career is to better other people. That's the whole point of what I'm trying to do. I'll touch on the whole customer service aspect later, if I remember it. But anyway, back in 2012, if you've heard some of my earlier podcasts and videos, you may have heard this story. But back in 2012, I was relatively new to the retirement services world. I'd only been involved for about a year and a half. Yep, about a year and a half at that point. Was still very much drinking from the fire hose because of the very diverse nature of this particular specialty. But I was at a conference one time in Little Rock, Arkansas, and it's day one, just day one of this 5-day conference, and I'm already getting overwhelmed by the information they're throwing at us. From an information standpoint, this was one of the best events I had ever attended. Anything and everything you could imagine was coming my way. Information galore, resources from every standpoint. We're getting regulations and references, federal law, all kinds of things. Great presenters, great assets to use in order to help our customers. And in that afternoon, about halfway through the afternoon, I remember having a thought of just how wonderful all this was. I thought that I could really make use of this information and that it was wonderful to be learning all of this. And then an epiphany struck. I realized that the only reason I understood what was going on here, the only reason any of the stuff that had been made available to me was making any sense at all, is I worked in the field. This was what I did. And during one of the breaks, I looked over these resources. I read some of the material closer, just randomly, picking out bits and pieces here and there. And it really surprised me that all of this information was written in a way that the only way you could possibly interpret it properly was if you worked as an RSO, Retirement Services Officer. All of this information was in bureaucratese, as I call it. It was legal speak and long, important words like process, okay, that's not a big one, entitlement, all these things that are intimidating, especially if you're not in the military. Why would that be important, you might ask? Well, the service member is only part of the equation. You've also got spouses and other family members that need to know what this stuff means. If they don't understand the information is useless. That's what I realized all of this material was. If you were an RSO, then it made sense to you, because this is what you did on a daily basis. But if you were not an RSO, it might as well be another language. In fact, in my early days, I remember speaking very much like most RSOs do, in the self-important, self-aggrandizing terms, not as in puffing myself up to be more important, but using these terms that don't make a lot of sense to people. And you can see it in their faces. They're smiling and nodding, but they don't really understand what you're saying to them. And ever so slowly, sitting with those people, I came to realize that I was not helping them at all. And now at this conference, I see my own mistake and see that we need to come up with something a little bit better. In fact, I thought back to my days as a retention NCO, when my job, kind of the other side of the coin of being a recruiter, my job was to convince people to stay in the military. Well, I had an advantage there. I could use all these terms, and for the most part, people understood, because I'm talking to the service member. But now, as a retirement services officer, I am what I call the third R in a career. I tell people there are 3 R's. That's what makes up a career. So now I am in the third R, trying to help people through that. And again, back to this conference, I realized that all this information, if I were to present it to Joe Blow service member, would be just like standing up there and speaking Russian to them. And now, as I said, this is quite an epiphany for a person who realizes that in many ways he's not helping the people he has sworn to assist. So, after reading excerpts here and there during that break that I mentioned, I started wondering, and sketching a few notes, started wondering if there was any website out there that actually presented this information in plain English. In fact, now that I think about it, it was 2011 when this took place, not 2012. So I'd only been involved for about a year. Anyway, started wondering if there was any place where I could find any sort of benefits information in English. No complicated words, no long drawn out flow charts and checklists and other things that just don't make sense to the average person. Can I find this in everyday language somewhere? So, like I said, I sketched a few notes, I wrote down a few questions, and that evening, while everyone else went out to party, I stayed in my room and scoured the internet. I did this every evening that week during that conference. I looked everywhere I could think of. Google was probably sick of me by that point, because I was trying every possible search I could for anything that led to benefits information in simple terms. And I came up with nothing every time. I would find websites all over the place. Of course, .mil, .gov, .com, all kinds of websites out there, but none of them ever presented this information in ways that you would speak to your wife or your daughter about these things. You know, certainly wouldn't get up in front of these people and speak in acronyms and long words and go into 2-hour presentations on one aspect of the benefit or on retirement or anything of the sort. So, in essence, everything I found was useless. Well, toward the end of that week, I started to have an idea flourish in my head. I even wrote down the name of the website, rcretirement.com, with a question mark. The question mark was asking myself, does this site exist? That particular place where I was awful for internet service through the cell phone, so I wasn't really able to research it during breaks. I had to wait until evening time when I could get on a computer. So that last evening, I started who is searches, basically looking for domain names. Is there something out there? And if there's not, can I make something like that? So, obviously, since this website now exists, the domains were available. I actually chose domain names for every reserve component. For example, if you were to type in Air National Guard retirement or Navy Reserve retirement, I've grabbed all of those domains and they now redirect to rcretirement.com. So on that last day, in fact, I wasn't really paying attention to the presentation at the time because it's pretty much just, hey, it's been a great affair, eventually we're going home sort of thing. So not a whole lot of substance on that last day. I started sketching out a plan. I wanted to create a simple English one-stop shop for all things military retirement. And it wasn't long after that, I'd say 2 or 3 months, which is not long for me. I was just playing around with this more as an academic exercise rather than a serious project at the beginning. Eventually, I grabbed the domains, established the redirects, and built a very simple WordPress site. I even, for a time, attempted to do a daily podcast on this material, but when combining that with now, instead of being the assistant RSO, being the only person in the state who was able to provide this service to people, now I'm the primary RSO, and I've got all kinds of other stuff going on at the time. I was a full-time college student. I was active in some charities. So a lot going on. The stress of trying to do a daily podcast was overwhelming. So I eventually just pod-faded. I disappeared. I think I only had 20 or 30 episodes at the time. And when I look back on them, they were truly awful. But they were a great educational experience. I can now come into this project anew with a lot more experience, a lot of failures and lessons learned to make it better. So like I said, I pod faded for a while. I kept the website going. There was never really anything on the site of significant value in the beginning. It was just a list of podcasts, and one thing, in fact, the only thing that I thought at the time made it worth anything at all, and that was the resources section of the site. You may notice I often tell people in my episodes, go to the resources section. fact, that section is now so large it might be intimidating in its own right. Maybe I need to redesign it so it's not so scary. There's a lot of stuff there, and it's growing all the time. In fact, I actually need to update the links in that section because there's a lot of stuff I posted to the site, or rather that I've uploaded to the server, that is not posted to the site as far as visible links. And over the last couple of years, I would occasionally post an article like an update to TRICARE or some other thing, like when the blended retirement system was first passed. I posted a little bit there, a very quick blurb, mostly a link to the law, which isn't very useful unless you read law. But little bits of information here and there over the last couple of years. But it's been almost a year now. In December last year, I had not started the medical procedures yet, but I had an inkling that they were going to begin soon, and knew that my own career and my ability to assist service members was eventually going to end, at least in this aspect. And since I said I want to be able to continue doing this in the future, I thought, well, there's no better time than to get busy, start providing information, and as I said, or alluded at least earlier, start building an audience. Establish myself as, even though I hate calling myself this, an expert in the field. I don't call myself an expert, but I've often been accused of it. And call that self-effacing or humility. Certainly not trying to insult myself. If there were metrics to assess who is the best or the worst RSO out there, I would not be surprised if I fell within the top 10-15% of that population. I certainly know what I'm doing, even though I can occasionally say things that might make people a bit miffed. I'm certainly not politically correct type out there. But anyway, I thought back in December of last year, all right, I don't know how much time I have left. It might be 6 months, it might be a year or more, who knows. But the only way to get this information and get my services out there is to make myself known. So I decided to try things a little bit differently. I liked podcasting, but I had also recently learned, or maybe realized, a better term, that podcasting is just one avenue of getting information out there. Some people don't mind listening to just an audio. In fact, I'm quite the consumer of podcasts myself. But video is also a valuable resource, and for some, a better type of media than audio would be. So I decided to try my hand at this whole YouTube thing. And so far, I've been pleasantly surprised. It's been almost a year now, and there's a small audience. Right as of this morning, the subscriber count is only 47, but I'm not discouraged by that. The viewership is, the viewership just passed. Well, not just passed, but recently passed over 1,000 views a month, which in YouTube terms is. Okay, I'm back in the car, recording again. Again, just testing out the recorder to see how it works. I did a quick review of what I had recorded earlier while I was en route to my friend's house. I did notice that it cut out the last minute or so of what I was saying, which was not anything of great consequence. I can certainly repeat it again. I was just going over some of the web traffic, some of the stats regarding the YouTube channel and the website. They're modest, of course, because as I jokingly say, I'm an internet nobody, working on curing that. But as of this morning, the subscriber count to YouTube was 47, and there are over 1,000 views per month, which, as I said, for most channels of any significance, that's nothing at all. But for someone just starting out, it's a good step. I always think for these huge channels out there that get tens or hundreds of thousands of views within an hour or a day of posting a new video, how long did it take them to get to that point? And that's why I don't let the low viewership counts discourage me, because this is just starting. And it's also a very niche sort of topic. We don't have a whole lot of, by percent of the population, we don't have a whole lot of people in the military in the first place, less than 1%, and only and less than 20% of that 1% ever make it to retirement. So we're definitely talking about a niche market. But that's also why I am going to start talking about other things in the future, other types of benefits that people can earn, and ways to use what they have better, whether they complete 20 years of service or not. That's why I think the blended retirement system is actually a good idea for a lot of people, because it does allow a percentage of portability, whereas what we have in the current retirement system is an all or nothing game. But let me finish up the topic of the statistics on the website and the channel. Like I said, we've got, I've already given you the YouTube statistics. On the podcast side, I'm actually rather impressed, even though it's a small number, I'm rather impressed with what's happened so recently, because it was not until, when was it? Until November, no, not November, October, when I finally was able to find the flaw in the podcast feed. The XML file that is posted had some flaws in it and was not being accepted by YouTube. Well, I finally found what those flaws were and fixed them. And since then, YouTube has authorized the podcast to be available there and not just having audio files posted to my website. Since that time, the podcast subscribership is about equal to the YouTube subscribership. When I checked it 2 days ago, it was, again, it's small, but it's modest, but that's okay. It was 37, which compared to the 5 or 6 that it was the last time I checked a month before, I considered good progress. Obviously, for all of these numbers, I want them to go higher, not just for myself, but for the people who are getting this information. And obviously, I've told you what some of my future plans are, and that might have you worried because, if I'm looking to make this my profession after I leave the military, you might be concerned about me charging people for this service. Well, that might be, but the primary focus of my website and the channel and the podcast is education. That will always be free. What I will probably do in terms of monetization of this service will be things like memberships, sponsorships, Patreon support, things of that nature. I don't foresee, at least not right now, any sort of direct charging for services. My intent is not to go into government service after I leave the military. I plan to make this completely private. And since I've mentioned in the past that I'm not going to get political, I won't go into my reasonings for that. But I do think that there will be some great services available. Once I have retired, it will take me some time to put them together. But I think people will like what they see a year or two after I have moved on to private life. My intent is to keep up this education channel, this website, and to maintain contacts with the right people and the right agencies so that my information to you remains as current as it is now. So that's going to actually be a significant part of my job, is just making sure that the information in my head is just as current a year from now as it is right now when I'm immersed in this information on a daily basis. That's actually quite a challenge. This is very much a use it or lose it sort of field. If you don't constantly refresh your knowledge of things in the retirement community, it atrophies quickly. As I have learned from several people who have helped me in the past, they will take a break for 3 or 4 weeks and then be amazed at just how much they are unsure of themselves or have completely forgotten certain elements of the craft. So, like I said, this is a use it or lose it thing. It's like a language. If you don't constantly make use of it, it starts to leave you. So I will definitely be trying to keep myself current and refreshed on all of these topics as I move into retirement. This is still several months away, don't worry. But I'll be making myself keep current on these issues so that I can continue to educate everyone else on things they have earned. And I will also try to find interesting, creative ways to not just provide the information, but for those who wish to support me, make it possible to do so. I have actually already had a couple of people who wish they could support me now, which is quite flattering, but I have no way to make that just as beneficial for them as it would be for me. So I've asked them to hold off. So I've rambled on about how I got the website started in the beginning, how it kind of floundered for a little while, and then how I decided to give it a second attempt. And it has done quite well, I think, as I said before, for an internet nobody. In fact, one of the most flattering things that has happened since I restarted this project is other people in my line of work have contacted me saying that they are now using the YouTube channel, the videos there, and resources from the website to help them in their daily jobs. And in one case, that I recall, even using it to help educate his customers, spouses and families, about certain benefits because he thought the presentation in the video was better than what he could have done. That was an amazing bit of feedback, and I was quite humbled to have heard that. So, as I said before, I think this is moving along quite well, though the numbers are small. I think over time that will change. I don't know how many of you might be familiar with the 1,000 true fans concept, but the theory is if you can get 1,000 true fans out of your audience who are willing to spend one day of their wages on you, then you can, through them, support yourself. Well, in the very long run, that of course is what I would like to do. I have no expectation of that happening in the next year or even 3 or 5 years. It's all going to depend on how well I do my job. If I don't do it well, then I will never be able to make this a profession from which I can support myself. Through this particular format, that is. So that actually lays quite the burden on my shoulders, and I completely welcome it. If I am half as good as I think I am, or even what others say I am, then I should be able to make this happen. In fact, in that regard, I have to thank the audience for providing their feedback and for subscribing in the ways that they have. In fact, that's another interesting thing about YouTube analytics. You can see how many views come from people who have subscribed to your channel and how many are from people who have not subscribed. And in the case of my channel, less than 10% of the total views are from people who have actually subscribed. So, whenever I see a certain number for subscribers, I know that on any given day, that is going to be 10% of the actual viewership footprint. So that's very interesting news to have in your head. It's actually quite encouraging. In fact, it's like the tip of an iceberg. The part you see is nowhere near the size of the full object. So YouTube subscribers are in the same sort of thing. What you see from the subscriber count, be it high or be it low, is just a small piece of the actual audience for that channel. So I take this as a good bit of encouragement that with every tick mark, with every increment that the viewership or the subscribership goes up, I, in my head, tell myself that 10 times that number are now viewing the channel over what there was before. And that is incredible. And to all of you in that audience, I thank you for that encouragement. All right, so again, rambled on about the website and future goals and what I would like to do with this project. I keep calling it a project because I don't think of it as a job. And even when I leave, I don't think of it as a job. This is a project. This is something I do because I enjoy it. And we've always heard, that if you can do what you enjoy, you'll never work a day in your life. Well, I would actually tend to disagree with that. If you do what you enjoy, you'll never work harder in your life, because this is your driving force. This is why you get out of bed in the morning. So what would you do if you didn't have to worry about income or providing for yourself and your family? What would you do? Well, I know right away, all other things being squared away, I would be a retirement services officer. I enjoy it that much. So I think that this is definitely going to be a promising project in the future. So talked about aspects of the site and what I'm going to do in the future. And sorry for being repetitive. This is just me rambling without any sort of notes. It's just complete stream of consciousness here. So you now know some of the things I want to do in the future and what I hope to be able to do for the audience, or maybe you should say for customers, but I don't really like that term. For the audience is a better term. Because I don't look at people who consume my information as wallets. I don't look at people as money to be lifted from them and brought over to me. As with so many things I've done in my life, I have found that just do your absolute best for people and the rewards come. When I was in sales back in the day, I worked for a flat hourly rate and had no expectation of anything above that. But as I very often found, people were willing to slip dollar bills in my hand for expedient service and doing the job well. In my military career, I found that if you don't have awards or promotions as the topmost thing in your mind, believe it or not, they come anyway. In fact, with my last promotion, I recall it almost being forced on me. I was told I was not going to leave that particular base, that post, until I had been promoted. Well, we'll say in so many ways that was a motivator to get things done quickly. Actually, quite the encouragement there. But anyway, I was saying that I don't consider the audience to be a source of revenue. I consider them a group to serve. And through service comes betterment for everyone. In fact, there's an individual, I don't know if he'll mind me saying his name or not, Rabbi Daniel Lapin, who had a wonderful book on how to improve yourself financially through service. And he had the best description of a servant mindset I have ever heard. And that was this. Now, I'm not quoted directly because my memory is not that good as far as being able to direct quote, but here's a very loose paraphrase. He was saying that whether you are self-employed or an employee, you should always approach your profession with the mindset of a servant. You are trying to better those around you, and as a recompense, they reward you, they say thank you, through contributing their funds. If you're in sales and you do a good job, I won't say with a sales pitch, but because that's not how you do it. If you're in sales and you provide the good, the bad, and the ugly to your customer, you tell them the good and the bad of the product you're not trying to sell it to them, you let them sell it to themselves by telling them the good, bad, and the ugly. And then they choose what's best for them, and if you make any sort of commission off of that, then you have to commission off of that. Or in the case of my situation back all those years ago, the occasional tip. So, with everything, if you approach it from a servant mindset of trying to improve those around you, then they will improve you. And it won't always be financially. It will be spiritually or personally. You will always find yourself benefiting in some way from each experience you have with these individuals. In fact, I can think of many of the families that I have assisted over the years for whom I had nothing to gain, particularly being a military member. I certainly can't gain financially from it, so why am I doing this? In fact, the particular instance going through my mind right now happened only a week ago. I was notified on the 14th of this month that a retired service member had passed away the day before. In fact, he had not even been retired from the National Guard for 3 months. He had not been out for very long at all. He had only retired in September. But found out he had passed away and wanted to help out with the survivor benefit annuity, and since he was eligible for Servicemen's Group Life Insurance, still wanted to get all of that set in motion, and several other things unique to his situation. So wanted to get all that set in motion without undue delay. Because especially in December, as we all know, practically nothing happens on the government side unless you get it done early. Because once you get to the latter half of the month, everyone's away. Well, here it was, the 14th, and it's I forget what day it was, actually. I can remember dates, but I can never remember days. It's weird. But the widow lived 2 hours away in another state, just over the state line. Well, I asked if she would be willing to let me come to the house with all the documents prepared. All she would have to do was sign, and I would answer all of her questions. That was it. That was all I had in mind. And as a result, after sitting at her kitchen table with her and her children and other family members, explaining in simple English what the benefits and other aspects of survivorship were available to them. Obviously, I walked away with a good bit of sadness because that's just infectious. And it turned out that I knew the individual, at least in passing. But as I drove away that night, I was amazed at the sense of accomplishment for, at least in some small way, alleviated some of the concern for this widow. Obviously, I couldn't reduce her grief at the loss of her husband, but I was able to help her out in a small way, knowing that certain financial benefits and other aspects of her husband's service would still be there for her, and that she would not have to worry about it herself. I would take care of it for her. As I said, that in itself was quite gratifying, and I thought made the entire trip quite worthwhile. Let's see. There was something else about that trip that makes me think it may have been, it wasn't a weekend, but it was certainly later in the week. If I were not driving, I'd probably stop and check what the day was. I do remember stopping at a late night bar and having an adult beverage afterwards, just to wash away my own small bit of mourning. I've lost friends in the service, both in training accidents and in combat operations, and at least from that aspect, I can understand the loss of people for whom you care quite a bit. I've also lost a parent of my own, so I can understand the standpoint of the children in that situation. So all of that, personal experience came back, in its own way. So, yep, needed an adult beverage after I got back from that, and then immediately go to bed and get up way too early in the morning to go back to work and do the rest of what I had set out for that family. And that is, in its own way, what I think Rabbi Lapin meant when he said, approach everything from a servant's attitude, and you will benefit somehow from it. I believe I have certainly benefited from the assistance to that family, just from satisfaction and knowing that, at least in my own way, I was able to help. Well, the return trip actually took a whole lot less time than it did to get there to my friend's house. So I'm now back at my residence, and I believe that it's quite time to conclude my ramblings. And in fact, I might even take all of this and put it together as a bonus podcast. Or who knows, might even add a picture or two to it and make it a YouTube video as well. So, since I've decided to do that, I will now say, thank you for listening to me ramble on for an hour now. And I hope in some way this has made some sort of sense. I can't even recall half the stuff I said since it was just so stream of consciousness for me. But as you can tell, since I set out to test a voice recorder, which I plan to use for recording presentations to classes that I give and whatnot, so that I can post them later, or other things of that nature. Since I was testing it and wanted to talk about nothing but retirement for reserve component, you can tell this is what I love to do. So I hope that's come through, and I hope in some way you enjoyed it. Thanks for listening, and have a wonderful day.